The acoustics of the singing voice. Today I will talk to you about the acoustic aspects of the singing voice. To begin, we will look at the physical properties of the human voice. I will not talk about consonants today. For now, we concentrate on the vowel sound. Sound production starts with air pressure from the lungs. In the larynx, the air passes the vocal folds. If these are then brought together, they will vibrate, and the sound that is thus produced travels through the vocal tract out of the mouth and or the nose. By the way, vocal folds have been called vocal cords too, but as they are folds of tissue whose edges may vibrate, the term folds seems more appropriate. So let's begin to have a closer look at the various positions of the vocal folds. Yeah. Here is a view of the bones and muscles of the larynx. The view is top down and the front of the larynx is at the bottom of the picture. I will start. Okay, well, I apologize for the elevator music. As you can see, the vocal folds can be manipulated by muscles to open or close in several positions. Here we see the action of the vocal folds during phonation. We look at the cross-section from the front. If the vocal folds are closed and air pressure is building up below them, their edges are pushed upward until they part and allow a blob of air to pass. This allows the edges to go back to the starting position and make contact again. The series of air blobs form a pulsating stream which forms the basic sound of the voice. The frequency with which the folds vibrate depends on their length and tension, as we saw in the previous slide. If the folds close well between the blobs, the produced waveform resembles a sawtooth or triangular shape, and so is rich in harmonics or partials, and the sound is bright. If the folds are not brought together completely, the vibration pattern loses overtones. The shape more resembles a sine wave and sounds dull or dark. This is the sound we produce when we try to speak softly, but are not whispering. When we whisper, the vocal folds are separated a bit and do not vibrate. The sound produced by the vibrating vocal folds is a bit comparable to the sound of a brass player playing only on his mouthpiece, provided that you could listen to the vocal folds without the vocal tract above it. When a singer sings in falsetto, only the edges of the vocal folds vibrate. Because of the lesser mass, the frequency is higher than with normal phonation. Okay, after originating in the larynx, the sound passes through a series of cavities before exiting through the mouth. This is known as the vocal tract. The first part is the pharynx or throat. From there into the mouth and or the nasal cavities, and finally out through the mouth and or the nose. We cannot really change the shape of the nasal cavity at will, but we can open and close the entrance to it with the soft palate, and even determine the amount of sound that is sent through it. But the most important sound changer is, of course, the mouth. The most obvious variables in the sound of a voice are, apart from the basic pitch, the vowels that we speak and sing. I leave the consonants out of this lecture because they do not play a big role in the singing sound. When we measure the amount of the partials of the sound of different vowels, it becomes apparent that there are several areas of harmonics that are characteristic for each vowel. These areas are called formants. They are directly related to parts of the vocal tract where certain changes are made. There are at least 5 formants that influence the characteristics of the vocal sound. These formants have influence on different areas of harmonics. The first 2 are essential for the forming of vowels. The first formant is determined by the opening of the mouth and jaw. So if you change from a to u, a, u, you change the first formant. The second formant is determined by the shape of your tongue. So if you change from I to U, you change the second formant. I, U, I, U. This formant is also used for pitch if you whistle. So you can quite easily determine the frequency of the second formant of a vowel by whistling. Put your tongue in the shape of the particular vowel, whistle, and then measure the pitch with a tuning app, for instance. The first formant frequency lies between about 200 and 700 Hertz, and the second formant between 800 and 2500 Hertz. I myself can whistle from about 525 Hertz, this is this C, can you hear it? To about 2500 Hertz, which is about this C. 2 octaves. The strange thing with whistling, by the way, is that it sounds, you have the impression that it doesn't sound as high as it does, because they are mostly sine waves. We can plot the frequencies of the first 2 formants of Dutch vowels in a grid that would look like this. For each vowel you can see which formant frequencies are valid. On the y-axis you see the first formant determined by the amount of jaw opening, and on the x-axis you see the second formant, which is determined mainly by the shape of the tongue. A, o, u. Here's e, I, u. So every point you see here has 2, well, that's clear, 2 frequencies. Let's go on. I was going to go here. This is a little program you can download. It's for free. It's called VT Demo. VT probably for vocal tract. And you can see here's the vocal tract. Can you see my mouse? Yeah. And here you see some slides here. I can put on. And, I can change the jaw opening until I close the throat. The second one is the tongue position. This is tongue shape. And then we have lip aperture. Tongue expansion, sorry, tongue expansion. This is lip aperture. This is lip protrusion. Then there's larynx height. You can lower or heighten your larynx. Then there's glottal aperture, so the opening between the vocal folds. Then here's the fundamental frequency, or a man. And then there's an extra one, that is the opening to the nose, the nasal cavities. Okay, I have to load this one again. I've made a little demo. Oh, some vowels. The A was a bit distorted because I had changed little things. And I have another one. Listen to this. Maybe you can guess what I've tried to make.
Bragi. Bragi.
It's supposed to be Bragi, but that's not a real R. Okay, but you can see the things that are going on inside the mouth and at the end of the vocal tract, the beginning and the end a bit. Okay. Here you see the whole range of notes that can be sung by humans. I've only used notes from the C scale to simplify things a bit. Below the notes you see their frequencies. These are of course the bass frequencies. When we sing them, there will also be multiples of these frequencies, the harmonics. Further, I have marked the first two Formant areas here. And you can see that they may overlap with some of the sung bass frequencies. I will get back to that later on. By the way, the second Formant extends beyond this picture, as you can see here with this arrow. It goes on a bit further. To try out the validity of the formants for vowels, I tried to synthesize the vowels by myself. As a basic tone, I used a sawtooth wave of 130 Hertz. That's a C. I will play it. That's the C. Here I've marked it in the and the sawtooth waveform is the waveform of phonating vocal folds, at least if they make good contact. The acoustic result is a fundamental frequency and a gradually diminishing range of harmonics. That's what you heard. This is the unaltered basic sound as it would sound without any Formant influence. With an equalizer you can filter certain frequency areas to either enhance or suppress them. You see a graphic representation of such an enhancement with Formant frequencies of vowel A enhanced. You see the two Formant. The first Formant is quite high, as you can see, with the open jaw, and the second Formant is well, a bit in the middle, you could say, something like that. And the resulting sound would be stop. Okay, is it clear how this works? Oh yeah, I forgot to say, I tried to line up the picture with the upper picture with the notes so that the frequencies match. So here's 100 Hertz and here's about notes of 100 Hertz. And here's 1 kilohertz, and that's about here. So it should match more or less. Okay, next one. This is A. I hope you agree that it works more or less. Now to come back at the peculiarity that the first formant region overlaps with a major part of the bass frequencies of the notes for each part, except the bass. Let's take the U sound that is still depicted on the screen. The first formant is around 300 Hz. If the sung note is higher than this frequency, so let's say the A of 440, if you want to sing this note but with this formant, you cannot really do it. The formant, because the formant is an overtone or a harmonic of this on this bass frequency. So this overtone does not exist when you sing a higher bass note. If a singer is trying to sing a 300 Hz formant when she sings an A440, the result will be that she is counteracting herself, which will result in an unclear and weaker sound. As it is physically impossible to sound this formant, the better course would be to adjust the first formant itself. If the singer shifts it up to within the harmonic spectrum, you could put the first formant on the same frequency of the bass note. The sound will clear up and then be stronger again. It can be argued that speech is rendered more and more unintelligible as the notes get higher. As this is in fact a known phenomenon and thus is accepted, it is best to agree with it and try to work with it as well as one can. For female singers, this means that they will open their jaw wider as notes get higher, and even assuming a smiling mouth posture with the corners of their mouth pulled back. All this to raise the first formant in an attempt to match it to the fundamental. To demonstrate this practice, I have chosen 4 singers singing The Queen of the Night from the Magic Flute by Mozart. Watch their mouths in the high notes. Well, it seems clear to me that they all use this technique. Well, in this slide I am showing the ranges of the different voice types. As you can see, the potential conflict of the first Formant frequency with the fundamental frequency is practically non-existent for basses. Tenors may have to do with it in their highest register, but for altos and sopranos it is an issue to take into account. Male singers that perform with an orchestra, however, have to deal with a different problem. If a non-professionally trained bass sings with an orchestra, his sound may be drowned out by the sound of the orchestra. Professional opera singers, however, are trained to develop a sound that will be heard over the sound of an accompanying orchestra. Measurements have shown that they produce an extra loud formant around 3000 Hz. Here you can see the hump here. So this is the energy of the orchestra, the thick line. And normal speech would also decline here in the overtones. But you can see that the opera singer has a big group of overtones, very loud. It's called the singer's formant. This is part of the spectrum where the orchestral sound level is much lower than here, for instance. In fact, the male opera singer clusters his third, fourth and fifth formants so that together they form the so-called singer's formant. One would expect this sound to be quite thin because it's so high, but due to the ability of the brain to reconstruct the fundamental and lower harmonics of a group of higher harmonics, we think we hear the whole voice. You could compare this to what happens if you listen to the sound of a band through a telephone or a transistor radio. Even though the lower frequencies are not present, we can still determine the sound of a bass guitar or a bass singer by their overtones. The singer's formant is achieved by shaping the pharyngeal cavity and the lowering of the larynx. Okay, I'm going to show you a spectrum on a spectrum analyzer the sound of baritone Dmitri Horostovsky, and he sings Avant de quitter ces lieux from Faust by Gounod. I'll explain first. You will see this move past the screen. This is a representation of the harmonics. And the frequencies are in the side here. You can see 1 Hz up to 19 kilohertz, and the band with the singer's formant is around here. Can you see that? Yeah. So watch it as you see the energies pass by. You will see every time when the singer sings, you will see energy in this area here.
La gloire se des ennemis, premier et plus brave de l'emmener, si les combattre pour mon pays. Et si vers lui Dieu me l'appelle, je sedie, soldata de mesaie, a tua seigneur roi des cieux,
Well, that concludes this lecture about the singing voice.